Today's lesson is about review for Quiz 2, Cycle 1. Evaluate trig functions in a unit circle. Part 1. Find the exact value of each trig function if defined. If not defined, write undefined. Here is the rules to evaluate trig functions in a unit circle. Find its coterminal angle between 0 to 360 or from 0 to 2 pi by adding or subtract 360 times integers or 2 pi times integers. Step 2. QRS, quadrant, reference angle, and a sine. Because trig function of any theta equals positive trig function of a reference angle or negative trig function of a reference angle. You have to use quadrant to decide it's positive or negative. Let's go back to these questions. You could see that this is all quadrantal angle. And remember, for 180 degree, the reference angle will be 0. And for 270, reference angle will be 90 degree. When you are dealing with angle whose reference angle is 0 or 90, sometimes you don't have to go through QRS when your answer is 0 or undefined. That's the shortcut. Let's deal with degree first. Cotangent negative 180 degree. First of all, this is a minor trig function, so we look for tangent negative 180 degree first. Then we do reciprocal to get the cotangent. For tangent negative 180, we know negative 180 degree plus 360, that's 180. Because we want to create the angle between 0 to 360 first. Then, since the reference angle will be 0, and we know that tangent 0 degree equals 0, which means we don't have to go through QRS, because positive or negative 0 both equal to 0. Therefore, for cotangent negative 180 equals 1 over 0, means undefined. Now let's go to number 4. For cosecant 270 degree, its major trig function will be sine 270 degree. Then we can go through QRS directly. For 270, I can count as a third quadrant or fourth quadrant. Reference angle is 90. Then for sine in third quadrant, we know that will be negative. Therefore, I can write down this. Sine 270 equals negative sine 90, means negative 1. Therefore, cosecant 270 equals 1 over negative 1 equals negative 1. Let's go to number 5. First of all, negative 270 degree, I add 360. Try to get the unit circle angle. So we got 90 degrees. Therefore, cosine 90. You don't have to do QRS because this is the first quadrant angle. That's 0. That's it. Let's go to secant 180 degrees. So his major trig function will be cosine 180 degrees. For cosine 180, that will be -1 because QRS, we go to second quadrant. Reference angle is 0. Then we know the cosine for second quadrant is negative. Therefore, equals negative cosine 0 degree equals -1. Then for secant 180, I got 1 over -1 equals -1. For radian, we know that pi reference angle will be 0. For 3 pi over 2, reference angle will be pi over 2. We know sine pi over 2, that's sine 90 equals 1. Tangent 2 pi, we know that's exactly same as tangent 0 equals 0. For tangent pi, since the reference angle is 0, so tangent 0, that's equal to 0. For number 8, secant negative pi over 2. Basically, we're looking for cosine negative pi over 2. But we know that negative pi over 2 reference angle is pi over 2. Since cosine pi over 2 equal to 0. So you don't have to go through QRS. Then you got the 1 over 0 equals undefined. Let's go to number 9. Cosine 4 pi over 3. Since this is between 0 to 2 pi, we directly go to QRS. And 4 pi over 3. Remember these rules to decide which quadrant for each unit circle angle. Remember the second quadrant, that's n minus 1 pi. Third quadrant is n plus 1 pi. And then for fourth quadrant is 2n minus 1 pi. Therefore, for 4 pi over 3, that's a third quadrant. Reference angle will be pi over 3. Sine for cosine third quadrant, that will be negative. So I can write down this one equals negative cosine pi over 3. Pi over 3 equals 60. Cosine 60, that means negative 1 over 2. Now let's go to number 10. 7 pi over 6, so go to QRS. Third quadrant. Pi over 6. Reference angle tangent for third quadrant, that's a positive. So you will get equals positive tangent pi over 6. Pi over 6, that's 30 degrees, so you got square root of 3 over 3. For number 11, 3 pi over 4, that's a second quadrant. And sine in second quadrant is a positive. That's how you get the positive sine pi over 4. Pi over 4 is a 45 degrees. That's how you get the square root of 2 over 2. For number 12, we will work on tangent negative 45 degrees first. So negative 45 degrees, I add 360. You will get 315 degree. And we know that reference angle is 45 and a quadrant is a fourth quadrant for tangent. That means negative, because all students take calculus, remember that. Therefore, for this one, you can write down equals negative tangent 45 degree equals -1. Then for cotangent, you have to do 1 over -1 equals -1, because minor trig function is the reciprocal of major trig functions. Now let's go to 13. Cosecant 390 degree. So we have to do sine 390 degree first. 390 degree is greater than 360. Therefore, I need to do 390 degree minus 360 degree. That's a 30 degree. You don't have to do the QRS because obviously it's a positive. Therefore, you got positive sine 30 degree. Means 1 over 2. Therefore, for cosecant 390 means 2 over 1 equals 2. Now let's go to secant -150. We need to figure out cosine -50 degree first. -150 degree add 360. That's 210. Go to QRS. We know that's a third quadrant. Reference angle 210 cannot be divided by 60, but it's divided by 30, so we do 30 degree. Sine for cosine third quadrant will be negative. So I will write down negative cosine 30 degree, which means negative square root of 3 over 2. Then I will flip over here, that's -2 over square root of 3. Square root of 3, we jump as a square root of 3 over 3. Then -2 carry on. That's the answer. Remember, here's the formula. 1 over square root of a equals square root of a over a. Since 11 pi over 6 less than 2 pi, so we go to QRS directly. Quadrant is a fourth quadrant. Reference angle pi over 6. For tangent, that's a negative. Therefore, I can write down equals negative tangent pi over 6. Pi over 6, that's a 30 degree. Therefore, that's a negative square root of 3 over 3. For number 16, 300, we go to QRS directly. Quadrant will be a fourth quadrant. And the reference angle 300 we can divide by 60, so 60 degree. And for sine, go to the fourth quadrant, that will be negative. Therefore, I can write down negative sine 60 degree equals negative square root of 3 over 2. Let's go to 17, secant 120. So we're looking for cosine 120 first. Go to QRS, second quadrant. 120 we can divide it by 60 directly. That's 60 degree. For cosine, go to second quadrant. That's a negative. So I can write down negative cosine 60 degree. Means negative 1 over 2. When I flip, I will get negative 2 for secant 120. We do the same thing for 18. You will get negative square root of 2 over 2. Let's go to 19. First of all, 11 pi over 3. We need to figure out its coterminal angle between 0 to 2 pi. Therefore, 11 divided by 3 equals 3 point something pi. So we need to subtract 2 pi. Then we do cross multiply here. We got 11 pi minus 6 pi. So we got top is 5 pi. Denominator multiply, that's 3. Then I go to QRS. That's a fourth quadrant. Reference angle pi over 3. For cosine to the fourth quadrant, that's a positive. So I can write down equals positive cosine pi over 3. Pi over 3, that's 60, so 1 over 2. Now let's go to 20. For negative 5 pi over 4, I need to get its coterminal angle between 0 to 2 pi. So negative 5 over 4, that's negative 1 point something. We need to add 2 pi. So we get denominator is 4. Cross multiply negative 5 pi, add 8 pi, means 3 pi over 4. We can go to QRS. That's the second quadrant. Pi over 4, that's reference angle. And we're looking for tangent. Therefore, it's a negative. It will be negative tangent pi over 4. Pi over 4 is 45 degrees. That's a negative 1. Here's the answer for 25 and 27. Because these two questions pretty easy. Now let's go to 26. For 26, 17 pi over 6. First of all, this is a minor one, so we're looking for sine 17 pi over 6. We got 2 point something pi. Therefore, we subtract 2 pi. Then we got denominator is 6. Here it's 17 pi cross multiply minus 12 pi. You got 5 pi. So we know that QRS, that's the second quadrant. For sine will be positive. Reference angle, we know pi over 6. Therefore, I can get positive sine pi over 6. Pi over 6 is 30, so we got 1 over 2. Then we flip. You got 2 will be the solution for 26. For 28, we have negative 5 pi over 3. We need to add 2 pi because this one gives you negative 1 point something. Our goal is to get the coterminal angle between 0 to 2 pi. Then we got denominator 3. This is negative 5 pi, add 6 pi. So we got pi. You don't have to do QRS because that's a sine pi over 3. Go to first quadrant, always positive. Get square root of 3 over 2. For question 30, that's a negative square root of 2. This is the clue how to do that. And for 31, that's square root of 2 over 2. They go to the fourth quadrant. Now let's go to 29. 14 pi over 3. We will get 4 point something pi. Therefore, you need to subtract 4 pi. We got, here's the 3. That's 14 pi. Minus 12 pi. So you got the 2 pi over 3. Then we go to QRS. That's a second quadrant. We're looking for tangent. That will be negative. So I will write down equals negative tangent pi over 3 means negative square root of 3. For 32, negative 19 pi over 6. This gives to you negative 3 point something pi. So we need to add even pi. That means add 4 pi. Then we got negative 19 pi plus 24 pi. Denominator will be 6. That will be 5 pi. So we go to second quadrant. For cosine, that will be negative. Therefore, I can write down answer negative cosine pi over 6. That means negative square root of 3 over 2. Now let's go to cofunction formula. This problem will be tested on your SAT. So you have to know. What's cofunction? Cosine and sine we call cofunction. Cosecant and secant we call cofunction. And a cotangent and tangent we call cofunction. If this is a degree, you want to change any function into its cofunction, we do 90 degree minus this theta. For radian, we use 2 pi minus that angle. You will get its cofunction of that angle. Or you can interpret this in this way. These two angles adding will be pi over 2. These two angles we add, we got 90 degree. In other words, for any trig function, you want to change its cofunction, you make sure these two angles adding equals 90 degree or pi over 2. For example, for cosine 35 equals sine, these two are cofunction. So I got to do 90 degree minus 35 degree. That's the answer will be 55 degree. For number 2, for tangent to cotangent, they are cofunction. So I do 90 degree minus 23 degree. You got 7 degree. For number 3, secant and cosecant, they are cofunction. So I got to do 90 degree minus 76 degree. That's 14 degree. For number 4, cosine sine, you have to use pi over 2. Subtract pi over 7. Then denominator multiply, that's 14. Then we do cross multiply. 7 pi minus 2 pi. So get the 5 pi. Therefore, 5 pi over 14 will be the solution. For number 5, we do pi over 2 minus the 5 pi over 12. Denominator will be 24. Cross multiply 12 pi minus 10 pi. That's 2 pi. So reduce will be pi over 12. Therefore, pi over 12 will be the solution. For number 6, secant and cosecant, they are cofunction. Therefore, I do pi over 2 minus 3 pi over 10. We got 20 as denominator. Then cross multiply 10 pi minus 6 pi. So you get 4 pi. Then reduce, you get pi over 5. Therefore, pi over 5 will be the solution. Now check your answer. We use the same strategy. For number 7, you got the pi over 10. For number 8, that's 5 pi over 12. Number 9, that's 5 pi over 18.